Hello, my name is Moira Dan, and I'm the president of the Craigdarroch Castle Historical Society. The Craigdarroch story has been marked by many chapters in its long history, but it's been more than 100 years since our Victoria landmark has been so severely threatened. In 2020, a worldwide COVID pandemic struck, and for the safety of our staff and for our visitors, we had to close our doors. Only slowly and cautiously have operations resumed. Over 2 years, we dropped from 22 full and part-time staff to 6, and we faced hundreds of thousands of dollars in losses. This has been a dark time indeed. But thanks to the hard work and dedication and vision of our executive director, John Hughes, the light of opportunity has reawakened our optimism for the future. Craigdarroch Castle has received $288,000 in funding, thanks to Heritage BC and the province of British Columbia. These funds are being used to, at last, restore our kitchen back to its early Dunsmuir era glory. What follows here is the story of Craigdarroch Castle and this exciting new chapter of our restoration.
Craigdarroch, Gaelic for a rocky oak place. For over 130 years, Craigdarroch Castle has dominated a high bluff overlooking Victoria, originally proclaiming the wealth of its first owner, Robert Dunsmuir. In his day, Dunsmuir was the richest and most important man in Western Canada. The castle was his vision, built on the massive profits of his coal mining business. Robert Dunsmuir died before construction was completed in 1889. But his wife Joan and several family members took up occupancy of the massive baronial mansion with 39 rooms and 25,000 square feet of space. The castle was the home of the Dunsmuirs until 1908, after which it was sold to a land speculator who subdivided the 28-acre estate. The luxurious furnishings were put up for auction. Everything was sold. The castle sat largely dormant for several years as ownership passed from hand to hand. Then in 1919, the property was purchased by the Canadian government, and the castle was converted into a hospital for returning World War I veterans. At this time, many structural changes were made to modernize certain rooms for hospital use, including the kitchen, which was totally remodeled with new flooring and equipment. Also, the plans for the original kitchen disappeared. Over the years, the castle continued to transform to suit its various tenants. These included Victoria College, the offices of the Victoria School Board, then the Conservatory of Music, and finally, over time, the Castle Museum Society, intent on restoration. Today, thousands visit the castle to see beautifully restored rooms where original floors, walls, and ceilings have been recovered. Gathering information from the original auction catalog, replicas and replacements, and in some cases original castle treasures have been reinstalled. The beautifully stained glass and intricate woodwork have also been repaired and reinstalled as well.
Well, the entire project is huge and difficult because there's so little evidence of how the room looked when the family lived here. There's no photographs, there's no plans, and so in 1919 all of the Dunsmuir's kitchen area was completely demolished. Walls were torn out, floors ripped up, wall finishes taken away, window casings, shutters, everything was gone. So we've had to uncover the floor and look behind the walls to discover evidence that will help us understand how the family had it configured.
One room that has never been restored, the kitchen, used for many years as a college classroom, later a music room, and most recently the castle gift store. But change was on the way. Since the installation of a new administrative center and gift store in an adjacent craftsman house, it's now possible to restore the kitchen, a big draw in any historic house.
Yeah, 86% of our visitors on their exit survey say they want to see the kitchen. And again, period appropriate kitchen for the 1890s. Dunsmuir era, yes. Dunsmuir kitchen, no, because we don't have enough information about what their kitchen looked like. But it will be appropriate. But I think if we're using technology and other tools and the opportunity to discover, if you open one drawer, perhaps it talks about the 1890s. If you open another drawer, it's got a photograph of the military hospital kitchen and can talk about that. So we want to make this kind of fun and allow people to learn the way they want to learn. No, it's not a normal kitchen renovation. It's going to be, I guess you can think of it as a series of sprints. The discovery work is being wrapped up. We're finishing up. We have started in tandem work on the shutters because we know they belong in there. We have historical information that says they're going to be in there. Then the next phase is to bring in the company that is going to take a look at the wainscoting and the details that are required there. And as a group, certainly with Frank as restoration manager and Neil as the restoration technician and Bruce Davies, our curator, we also sit down with Giovanni, who is in charge of the visitor service and the visitor experience. And that whole team comes together and we talk about technically what's required, but at the end of it all, when the kitchen is so-called done, what is the visitor experience like? So it's a series of steps and stairs. They're all timed out. We know how they're supposed to happen.
And then after that, we started analyzing what, if anything, the floor and the subfloor could tell us about what was here originally.
A month and a half of hard labor removing a cement floor placed in the kitchen in 1919 as part of the hospital conversion. The first objective is to safely reach the original floor supports. Then it's time to discover how the room originally looked.
Because really all we're really going off of is nail patterns. So you can't really see much of them now. You'll see some down on the floor in there. We basically went around with toothpicks and just put toothpicks into every nail hole we could find throughout this on all the joists. And then we take those nail patterns and try and find a pattern within, whether they had a specific use, which could help tell the story of what the floor was made of, or whether there was walls, or whether there was doorways for that matter. So we just take those little bits and pieces to try and tell a bigger story of what was in the space.
Originally, the dining room opened through a side door to a pantry, then on to an outer kitchen hallway. The historic blueprint is faint, but the way this room was originally configured can still be outlined with the help of educated guesswork.
So the wall created this corridor that terminated in this room here. And this was sort of a lobby. It was a staging point for food delivery and possibly also for serving food into the pantry, where it would be plated in its final state and then taken by the servers into the dining room. Frank and Neil have ascertained that there were two doors, one about here and another one about here. So to get into the kitchen from the pantry, you'd have to come into this lobby area and then walk in through a door here. And then if you were in the closet, the storage room, you'd come in that way. And then the large kitchen area that I'm pointing to now out here had the French range, and then in the middle of the room was probably a work table. I mentioned earlier that we found tiles. Well, some of the tiles impregnated with cooking grease were found in this basic area, and there were also fragments of coal found here.
Curator Bruce Davies has spent decades examining other stately manors built in the same period as Craigdarroch Castle. Great homes in the United States and Europe have offered many clues about the original castle layout and equipment. But one house in particular yielded important information.
There have been examples that we found that are really important and helpful. For example, the Pabst Mansion, an 1892 house built in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for Mr. Pabst, the brewer. The pantry there is beautifully outfitted in birch cabinetry, and that house has window blinds by the Willer Blind Company, and so does Craigdarroch. So there's only 2 years difference in the date of completion. And with this Milwaukee connection, because Craigdarroch also has Willer blinds, we see a similarity. But not just that, we found a piece of molding in our butler's pantry that had written on the back of it in pencil, Dunsmuir, butler's pantry. And the profile is unmistakable of the crown molding that I'm talking about. It's made of birch. Well, it just so happened I was in this pantry at a reception, and I looked up at that molding and I thought, that looks like the molding at Craigdarroch, and I knew that it had this Willer Blind connection. So I think it's safe to say that our pantry cabinetry was probably very much like the Pabst Mansion. And this has some of the original Dunsmuir era paneling here, tongue and groove paneling. The shutters that were here, and there were 4 of them that rode up in these tracks, these are original. These are made of ash from Milwaukee. These shutters were all louvered. So there were 5 unique panels full of louvers that admitted a great deal of light, but afforded privacy, both to the cook and kitchen staff, but also to the family if they were out there and they had guests on the lawn, as they did in 1891, 300 guests out there having a garden party. Well, you didn't want to see people working in the kitchen. These louvered shutters allowed light in, but created privacy.
Indeed, the huge lawns that sweep down from the castle have been used many times over the last century. For example, there were massive wedding receptions and parties hosted by the Dunsmuirs. Now, with a fully functioning kitchen with real cooking capacity, dinners can be served again, turning back the clock.
You could, and it wouldn't have to be that imaginary, because in the summer of 1891, Jessie Dunsmuir married Sir Richard Musgrave, an Irish baronet, and there were 300 guests partying on the lawn here behind me. So the kitchen would have been in full swing then. The staff would have been coming out of that kitchen door behind me, and there would have been marquees on the lawn, large tents, and in addition to that, the Dunsmuirs held large balls, and these usually incorporated ball suppers. These were dinners for up to 110 guests. There was one here in 1894, for example, where they entertained the American consul. And the idea then was to have the dining table set up with a lot of food, but then small satellite tables in that room and elsewhere in the hallways, up the stairwell in those alcoves. The billiard room would have been set up with tables, and dinner would have been served from about midnight until 2 or 3 a.m. Dancing would resume, and then the party would end. Champagne would have been available all the time, and we have a diary account of Kathleen O'Reilly, one of the Dunsmuirs' friends, who writes that she walked home as the sun was coming up with her brother Jack back to Point Ellis House.
In stages, Craigdarroch Kitchen promises to be a central showpiece of the museum, as well as a hands-on attraction once a temporary floor is installed.
It's designed to allow us to go back in over the next couple of years if we come across further information until we're fully settled on what the floor looks like. Because as you know from what you've seen, the information is completely missing. You know, was it tile? Potentially in one area, maybe. Was it wood? Was there a stone hearth? You know, those sorts of things we don't know about. So the idea is that we would be working with something that's very much like a dance floor. So it's sprung, it'll handle weight, it'll handle a lot of traffic on it. It would handle weight of particular objects and things as well, but it would also allow us to take up a section and revisit where we think a wall might be, or take a look underneath if we get some more information. So although temporary, it could be temporary for 10 years. And we do have a presentation plan for the kitchen, and the one thing that we brought in someone outside, Tim Willis, did a review of what's possible as far as presentation is concerned, and it was determined that we're going to make the space a bit more interactive than our traditional period room settings go. So the chance to open a drawer, to touch the tabletops, to touch the range. Perhaps we'll use some digital projections to project foodstuffs or cooking on tables or those sorts of things. How we deal with the speaking tubes could be technology where you have an iPad and you could flip through pictures and say, this is what the enunciator panel may look like. I'm spitballing here. We haven't decided that this is what it will look like, but we're leaving the opportunities and options open as far as that goes, because this, as the final stop on a tour, is going to be that I remember the kitchen. I toured the castle. It was amazing. The kitchen is a unique experience, and that's how we're proceeding.
There has been so much that has already been painstakingly restored, but the kitchen will be a crowning achievement. The work to the kitchen will include the restoration and replacement of shutters, new wainscoting and molding around windows and doors, repair and painting of plaster surfaces, and the installation of flooring. And how far away is overall completion?
Gosh, I'm afraid to say I think it's probably 8 to 10 years out, simply because the issue of the walls has not been settled. Are we going to reconstruct the walls the way the Dunsmuirs had them, or imagine that they are there using these markings in the floor? I don't know. It's really going to be up to the board of directors to decide how they want to go that way. In terms of getting the pots and pans and having the furniture made, I think that it wouldn't be unreasonable to see that completed in 3 or 4 years.
So by that time, you'll be able to walk into the room as a visitor and go, oh, this is the kitchen. We may only have information panels, a couple of exhibit spaces, 1 or 2 bits and pieces of kitchen utensils, that sort of thing, but you'll know you're in a kitchen. 2 years later, there may be a range with the digital projection. We'll go, this is an expanded experience. So again, sprints. Because it costs a lot of money, we have to rebuild the business, we have to get all that stuff after the COVID thing. So how do we fund the visitor experience is also part of the question. We want to listen to our visitors. If we think, hey, this is a really cool story, let's put that in there, and people go, why am I looking at this? We don't want to do that. We want to know what you want to see so that we can put that kind of information in play.